I found it really interesting the way you guys executed the breach party. So like I was up during that, kind of watching a lot of live games and collecting replays. I'm not sure if you saw the collection I posted, but just trying to get like a feel for how people were using the new unit, and it was really interesting to see the way you did it as an event. So you had a whole bunch of these players, some of them a lot more experienced than others, just all goofing around trying to figure out how to use this thing as part of an event, as opposed to it kind of trickling in. And because of the way you increased the frequency of that unit showing up, so people didn't have to do that through custom games. I thought it was really interesting. I mean, it was sometimes almost too much to where people were like, "Can I play with not these units for a round?" But it was really interesting in terms of getting feedback fast, I think, on that unit. Into like what you were talking about making it stronger so people play it more and things like that. But it also, in terms of the dynamo, was really interesting because it seemed to make the games a little crazier than people were used to, and almost made it more of a memorable event.
Yeah, well, there's so many posts. People are like, "Oh, Dynamo's ridiculous. It's the best unit in the game," and other people's like, "Dynamo's not too good. I get 2 of them and then rush the guy who gets 4 of them, win every time." I think people still haven't really figured it out, and we honestly haven't figured it out either. That one may take a little bit of time. I mean, we have a giant page in our internal forum of different ideas of like modifications we could make to Dynamo to change it. So if it really is the community's consensus that Dynamo is too crazy and we need to tone it down, then we will. But we might just let people goof around with it for a little while longer. We'll see. One stat that we now have is we can look at the percentage of the people that are embargoing a unit. So if something is really hated, we could see it getting embargoed. And I think maybe January or something, we would just put out these surveys. Here are all the units. Which ones do you hate the most, and which ones do you like, and which ones are OP, and which ones suck? And that information was pretty cool. It revealed some things like nobody can decide whether Iceblade Golem is OP or sucks, stuff like that. But now we have embargoes, so I haven't checked embargoing on Dynamo yet. I mean, there's some kind of novelty thing where people don't want to embargo something that's new because they want to play with it. But maybe this week when we could see who's starting to embargo Dynamo and see if that is actually a thing.
I have a feeling that it's going to take a while before people actually decide on that one because, like you said, there's the novelty factor. And when I was watching during the breach party and talking to people, it seemed like a lot of them were like, I just don't even know what's going on right now. It's so crazy. Like, not that it was broken, just that it changed the way the economy worked so much that all their previous ways of thinking about things were just kind of thrown out the window, and they just didn't know how to play.
Well, Dynamo is actually one of the least tested units we've ever thrown on the live server. There are many units, versions of Windsor we'd been playing with for years. And we sort of knew how the unit worked, and we still got it wrong. I mean, we still got it way off, but we more or less had a feel for how the unit worked and when it was good and stuff like that. Dynamo, none of us had a clue. We were just like, well, it seems kind of balanced on paper. It doesn't seem like any of the openings are broken, and we sort of did all the basic checks. So, well, the HP seems okay. That when you're breaching, you'll probably want to kill the dynamos first. People still sometimes don't kill the dynamos first, so we might need to nerf the HP. But we did all of the basic checks, and we played some games with it, and it seemed all right. And we could have sort of put it on our test server and tried to play lots and lots and lots of games with it. But sometimes, for a unit like Windsor, that wouldn't have helped. And, we did. We played tons and tons of games with Windsor, and we still had no idea how broken it was. And we even did, we do small pool studies. Like, we'll take Windsor plus Frostbite and play that set over and over and over again and try and see if player 2 can force a win or something like that. And we couldn't find a win for player 2. Even though it felt like player 2 had this unstoppable rush, there are always ways for player 1 to defend. It felt like it was okay. But the problem is being able to defend after practicing with it 10 times is not the same as having a fair chance on the ladder in a 1v1 game with a random Windsor set. And so that was quite a lesson that we learned there. And we spent all this time trying to analyze the unit to see it was broken, but at the end we discovered it was like 60% player 2 win rate, which is the most of any unit we've ever had by far. Scorchilla was 58%, and I don't think we've ever seen anything above like 56 or 55. But to hit 60% was pretty much unheard of. So we were like, okay, fine, that's it. We'll just nerf it.
It's definitely good to have those analytics in place to be able to actually verify that sort of thing.
Oh yeah.
So, like, one of the things I thought interesting about the breach party thing as well was the idea that maybe you guys could have code in there to basically time limit units. So let's say you're really kind of unsure of a unit, and you say, okay, we're going to make an event to run this unit during the weekend, and then after the weekend it goes away, so we can study the stats and figure out what to do with it. But it kind of like basically a public testing weekend or event of a unit to get feedback on it before you actually decide whether or not it's even a unit you want to keep permanently in the game. Is that something you guys like would do as far as events go like this, or?
Yeah, well, I mean, Alex was saying to me that he thinks that events are a really good thing because they kind of galvanize the community and give people something to look forward to. And we saw Hearthstone do their Tavern Brawl, and of course Magic has their PTQs and tourneys and stuff like that. Sorry, one sec. I think events are great, and I think we will try to do more of them. I'm not sure exactly what form they will take, because something like the breach party, it kind of can illegitimize the ladder. Like if players really want to climb to the top of the ladder, then maybe if they can't because it's a stupid mode on the ladder, then they might get frustrated. But at the same time, if we have a separate queue for the bonus mode, then that may fragment the player base. It may be harder to get a game because players are in one queue or the other. And that said, the fact that we have this multi-queue system where you can just check whatever modes you want, that kind of alleviates that problem. I don't know. I think the ability to increase the probability of seeing a new unit after it's released is really good. And we could have short, like say 4-hour sessions where today drones cost $2, next 4 hours. People might find that kind of fun. We could even change the starting configuration. You don't start with 6 drones and 7 drones. It's drones cost $1 and you both start with 10 walls. It's no rush 20 minutes, guys. We could do whatever. And once we introduce casual mode, we probably will. There will be some stupid mode available there, and if we have enough players to support it, there's no reason not to have it.
I've definitely seen that be a trend at like GDC and a lot of these other, kind of water cooler topics among especially mobile and social games, is the idea of live ops being a huge benefit to games. And some of that's because these games are boring and degenerate in the first place, and they need something to spice it up. But it is kind of interesting to see some of the ones that do a lot of live ops getting a lot of interest in terms of like when people play, and kind of galvanize around times and things like that. Or let's say there's the weekend warriors versus the people that play during the weekday or during lunch break, or these different kind of events. And obviously you have issues with fragmenting the queue in terms of how people play and when they play with that. But it seems like it's been a very interesting development along the lines of where these games are going to keep a game that is technically repetitive interesting, not feeling so grindy.
Yeah, well, I think already Prismata does a lot to avoid that just by the nature of the game and the fact that you play with different units every time. Maybe people who play for months and months and months, maybe they'll get bored if we don't continue releasing new units. But even when there are half as many units as there are now, we had players who played thousands of games and told us that, every set is still compelling. They're still learning a new thing every time they play. I feel like I learn a new thing every time I play. So it's not necessarily so much about making the experience more novel for existing players. It's more as a draw to the players who are maybe on the sidelines and aren't grinding every day, but maybe need an excuse to get back into the game. And, along way in the future, it may just be an excuse for us to send a weekly newsletter to people. Oh, here's what's going on this week, and we get people to sign up for it, and sort of as a way to maintain that connection with the customers, to keep the retention going. And we don't do that kind of stuff. We don't spam people every week telling them what's up or something like that. But in the future, when we have more events, we have more community things going on, we could, and it's probably a good thing to do. And I think there will be a lot of players who want to take part in that, even if they're not necessarily laddering every weeknight.
Yeah, I agree. One of the ways I kind of experimented with that in the game that I used to work on was we had a weekly rules of engagement, which was a separate Coliseum sort of thing. So it was a separate queue, basically, to fight in. That was basically a set of deck building rules, essentially. Like, these kinds of cards can be in your deck, and that's it. Or it was either exclusion or inclusion kind of rules. But the idea was that it wasn't so much that it was to spice things up in terms of being an event. It was more like people had to use their cards very differently. The synergies became different because the rules were different in terms of what the dominant metas were and things like that. And so in terms of having events that basically change the way people play, like what I was saying about the Breach event, the way the Dynamo kind of changed up how people's strategies, how they thought about their strategies, might kind of loosen some neurons and get people maybe experimenting a little bit more instead of getting stuck in a rut. But I do agree that when I've asked in the interviews whether or not people are worried that even if there was no units added, would the game get stale, they've pretty much said what you said in terms of, hey, the combination of units, even if they're pretty different units, still tends to make every game feel new for the most part.
Well, you are kind of talking to probably the game's biggest fans, so you may want to take what they say with a grain of salt, because the people you really need to talk to are the people who aren't playing anymore.
Yeah.
But I don't think I know of anybody who quit because the game didn't have enough novelty for them.
Yeah.
I mean, and we do plan to keep releasing content, and we're putting out new units every month, even though it's only an alpha. And part of that is sort of because we still don't have art for all the units, and we're still testing some of them. But we also just want to experiment with this sort of slow drip or monthly release, or see if we could find the groove of what keeps the game feeling fresh.
Do you guys have some mechanics that you're pretty sure about, but they're just almost ready to go out? And chill was a big deal in terms of how much it changed, how complex the game can be. Do you have some mechanics like that?
Oh yeah. Well, okay. So I don't think we have any more keyworded mechanics planned for the first batch of units, but we definitely have different combinations of ideas that you haven't really seen before. Something like Dynamo, it didn't involve any new keyworded mechanics, but it is a unit that plays in a way that's different from any other unit. And so, right now, for example, we don't have any unit that has both Frontline and Lifespan. And in testing, we've actually had about 3 different units in past versions of Prismata that had the combination of those 2 attributes. But we just haven't got around to putting any of those 3 out yet. But they're all really interesting. One's a really defensive unit, one is sort of a more offensive type of unit, and there's one that's kind of just this giant thing. And they all were really interesting. And if you think about the consequences of a unit that has both Lifespan and Frontline, it's like, you have the option of killing it, or you have the option of waiting it out to let it die. And whether or not it can block makes it different. There's so many possibilities just using the ingredients we already have that, we haven't hit the bottom of our pit of ideas. We don't even feel close. I mean, we have somewhere a 10-page document in 6-point font of different ideas for Prismata units. And, half of those pages would require new mechanics and sort of new programming, new icons or keyworded abilities or whatever. But the other half is literally just stuff we can make with the existing mechanics we have. It's quite a versatile set of mechanics with a lot of design space. And we've never felt the need to bloat the design space with more keyworded abilities and stuff like that yet. Now, if we do an expansion, well, there's a good chance you'll see one or two new keyworded abilities or something like that. And we definitely have a few front runners among the abilities that we might be considering for the first expansion. But that's kind of a ways down the line. We want to get the initial release done first. So we try to block those thoughts out of our mind as much as we would really love to be playtesting and experimenting with even more new ideas. But there's many units that we played with in the past that are currently sort of on the sidelines. We call them brimstoned because we have this code word. Alabaster is the code word for the first set of units, and brimstone is the second one, and cobalt is the third one. And so, we take an idea and we say that's now brimstoned, meaning we are not putting it in alabaster. We're not going to implement this mechanic in the current set of units, but maybe in brimstone.
And then you'll shelve them from brimstone when they just don't fit in there, and keep a constant conveyor belt going of ideas.
Well, it's like if you look at Magic the Gathering, right? The game's 20 years old, and every year, they'll have between 8 and 10 new keyworded abilities, and there's new ones every set. And they have the ones they call evergreen, which are sort of there perpetually, and then they have ones that rotate in and out with each new set. And I think that's great because they're able to provide new types of gameplay and add new feelings to every set, so they all seem kind of different. And often the different colors of the clans or whatever will get their own mechanics, and it adds all this flavor. And they've been doing it for 20 years, and they still don't seem to be at the bottom of the barrel. Like, I never read a new set and feel like, oh, they must be really scraping for new ideas. It doesn't seem to feel like that to me. It feels like, it's just a very large design space, and, they'll never explore all of it.
Well, I guess when their core mechanic is based on exceptions to rules, that kind of makes it a pretty infinite space.
Yeah, well, I mean, our raw design space is actually very tightly confined, and there are a number of reasons for that. One is because it was designed for a computer in mind, so we wanted, we didn't want there to be any kind of human interpretation of the rules required. For example, we have a lot of internal design rules of the form, like anything that happens at the start of the turn, the order can't matter. Because if it did, then there would be rules questions. Which one happens first? Oh, stuff like that. So we make these internal rules. Another internal rule is you can never have resources converting from one form to another such that it forms a cycle. We used to have a unit that you'd have to pay gold for it to attack, but when you combine that with the unit that we now call Oride Core, you could get cycles where you would blow a pixie, use Oride Core, use this other unit, undo the pixie, and then you could be in a state that you could never reach without having done any undos. And of course the AI would not be able to handle it. So at some point we just decided enough's enough. We don't want to have that. And so we have all of these internal design rules that are designed to simplify our life, and they do reduce our design space temporarily, but we're provided with the flexibility of expanding through those design boundaries later if we so desire. So, we could build crazy rule-breaking units later, and we probably will. And, people's jaws may drop when they see them, but that's part of the fun.
Yeah, the whole cycle thing, one of the we tended to run into that on the game that I worked on. We actually had to code in effect limits, meaning after 1,000 effects, the game would just stop processing effects during that turn, because you'd get server cycles like that would just crash the server because it couldn't even handle, just because people will come up with those things, right? They'll come up with these crazy machines of chain effects to where they find a way to exploit this infinite cycle that you kind of have to watch out for, because obviously people are looking for any kind of weird, fun edge they can come up with to do stuff like that. So I imagine at least your internal testing hopefully comes up with most of those if you're looking to try and break the game before people do once it gets public.
Well, we have some design rules that prevent turns from being too long. Like in Prismata, there's no way to get an exponential amount of damage in a turn, and the design rules kind of enforce that. we also have design rules of the form. We have this thing we call Shalev's rule, which basically says like owning stuff has to be good, killing stuff has to be good. We don't have any units that are like, do 1 damage for every drone your opponent has, because then owning drones would be bad. And we do this for a couple of reasons. One is sort of for our own sanity, to prevent these types of design issues, but also it helps the AI be able to evaluate positions, and it avoids certain types of player frustrations that can arise out of like, not being sure whether or not something is good or bad. It clarifies the game state in a way that sometimes doesn't happen. And you sacrifice a bit of the surprise, but we don't really have randomness in the game anyway, so it's not like we can exploit surprise as a game design mechanic, so it kind of seems okay that we're not taking a huge loss there.
So I assume you guys pretty much have set in stone you're never going to add a mechanic or ability or anything like that that's going to have a, say, % chance to succeed. That's kind of completely off limits, right?
Well, we did it on April Fools, but it's kind of like, I would feel like we would be jumping the shark if we did that. It's not what Prismata is based upon. And I actually think, like, we've gone on so long for the RNG, people would call us hypocrites if we introduce something with randomness. Yeah. And, I'm not the type of person who enjoys that kind of gameplay anywhere. Like, say we had a unit which was, at the end of your turn, randomly choose an opponent's Blast Forge, Animus, or Conduit and destroy it. We could have that. It wouldn't really break any of the rules of the game. It wouldn't screw up the trigger system. But I don't think it's like that interesting in terms of gameplay. And 2, the cost of changing our philosophy with regards to what the game is, like, the mechanic would have to be so compelling that to justify that, and I cannot foresee the existence of a mechanic that's that amazing and that compelling that we can't just find another equally interesting mechanic that doesn't introduce randomness. Like, so far so good. We've been doing this for 4, I guess almost 5 years, and we have never felt we needed randomness. So, if in the future we do, then maybe, but it's, we've got pretty far without it, so I don't see any reason why that should change.
That's good. From what I've seen, honestly, whenever that gets introduced into a game, people will almost always go towards whatever the most conservative thing is, the most reliable, setup. They're going to shy away from anything that's not a certainty anyways.
Yeah, well, we've even seen, like, a unit like Kinetic Driver, has led to some really interesting comments from people. Like, I've gotten bug reports from people who send me a replay and they go, Kinetic Driver is the most busted thing ever. And, they go some build and they'll build an extra Animus and an extra Blast Forge just in case their opponent snipes them. And some people want to play so conservatively in the face of even not random uncertainty, but just uncertainty of what their opponent's going to do. And of course, the opponent didn't snipe anything and sniped stuff a few turns later. But you get so many different reactions from people who don't necessarily understand the game mechanics or the point behind them or how they really work. And things are challenging. Like a unit like Kinetic Driver. That's not going to be in mission 1 of the game. It's that's going to be something that's introduced later to players who are more experienced and kind of get it a bit more.
Have you seen some units that you've put out that you've really kind of had to explain to the player base, like get on Reddit and be like, look guys, you guys are just misunderstanding what the point of this unit was?
I think nobody gets Reservoir, and the reason is complex. And I haven't put out a blog post on it. Maybe I should tomorrow. I don't know.
You gotta do one anyways, right?
Yeah, I gotta do one anyways. I don't have a lot of time. But so here's the thing with Reservoir. Will and I played a zillion test games with it. Base set only plus Reservoir and with other units. And through doing this tons of test games, we learned how to use it pretty effectively. And we priced it at 6 plus a red plus a green. And a lot of players said, it's not getting used effectively. It seems weak, right? But they weren't finding the optimal builds, and I would review replays with Reservoir, and people would be making all kinds of mistakes, like they would get way too much green, or they wouldn't get enough drones, or they would keep building things that weren't drones too long or too short, or their builds were not refined enough to really provide any information on whether or not Reservoir was strong or weak. And so we said, okay, let's just buff it. I personally think at 5 plus a red and a green, it's really friggin' good sometimes. And I think it may take some time for the community to really get to know it and learn how to use it optimally. If people do want to know how to use it optimally, here's a tip. The thing you want to buy after you get Reservoir is not conduits, it's drones. Because the green sitting in the bank doesn't provide any interest when it's just sitting there waiting to be used. But the drones that you build waiting to convert to force fields, they do produce gold after you buy them. So often what you want to do is you want to get Reservoirs, get Tarsiers for maybe 1 turn, and once the Reservoirs tick down to about 4 or 3, you just want to spam tons of drones. And only when it's 2 or 1 do you want to get conduits, and you want to get max 3 conduits, maybe 4 sometimes. I see people getting 6, 7 conduits as a Reservoir. But we didn't figure that out by studying the unit on paper or playing with it once in a while. We figured it out by playing with the same unit over and over and over again as we spent, probably more than a dozen hours each trying to redesign the unit. And so, I think there are a few other units that maybe have been a bit underappreciated. And what may have to happen is we may need to buff them until people start to learn how to use them. And if they learn too well, then we may need to nerf them again. But I'm okay with that.
Do you ever just post a replay code and be like, this is how you do it?
I could. I could drop a replay code. I always feel like when I drop a replay code of me defeating somebody with some strat, then I don't want it to seem like I'm insulting somebody or I'm trying to say they lost. I wish I could anonymize the replay code. Maybe I could just go get my fake account and play my fake account. No, just literally play the exact same moves as I played against some guy on the ladder. But I don't want to post a replay code of me smashing some guy with Reservoir and be like, hey guys, look at this. Here's how you use Reservoir. So I don't know. We'll see.
I'll be honest. Sometimes if I see you're on playing games, I'll just watch your game to steal your replay code in case you did something really interesting I want to find out about later. I do like the publicness of the replay codes for that purpose. To be like, well, hey, if Elyot's playing or Will is playing, they might not know something I don't know about, so I'm going to keep that replay code because I can watch that at any time later.
Yeah, well, we always had this debate of should replay codes be private? Should you be able to look at a random player's profile and look at all the games they've ever played? And we don't want players to feel like their games are always on display all the time. But maybe for top players who are at the top of the ladder, the desire for us to share their games with other people starts to trump our desires to keep everybody's replays private so that people don't feel self-conscious or whatever. Because I feel like if you're at the top of the ladder and you're vying for a spot in the top 100, you probably don't care that much if I don't know. You're probably not self-conscious about being a bad player or having other people see your replays. You might actually be more conscious of giving away your secrets through your replays. And I don't know if that will ever become a problem, but I don't think anybody has told us that. It's sort of like in Pro StarCraft where players they want to practice, and they often don't want to practice against people who sort of know what's coming, so they will go on ladder as a Smurf and play people on the ladder. And I remember there's this story from Brood War. I don't remember who it was, but it was 2 Korean Brood War players who ended up in a Pro League game against each other. And the Protoss player played this crazy rush against the Zerg player, and the Zerg player defended it brilliantly. And when interviewed afterwards, he said, oh, well, I actually played some guy on the ladder who did this exact strategy to me last night, and I studied it and learned how to beat it. And it turned out that the exact same two pro players had played each other the night before on the ladder, with the one guy pulling this crazy rush and winning, and then his opponent studying it and figuring out how to beat it. So it's kind of like, if you get a pro scene where there's like money at stake and stuff like that, that people may start accumulating vaults of secret openings that they don't want to use on the ladder and they want to save for tournaments. And I don't necessarily feel like that's a bad thing, because maybe it'll make tournaments really exciting. Like, you never know when you're going to see something spectacular.